More than 1 in 7 American children gets diagnosed with ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Now a new book takes a look at the more than half-century of history of the disorder, from its roots to its current cultural and medical role. Alan Schwarz is a former New York Times investigative reporter and the author of ADHD Nation: Children, Doctors, Big Pharma, and the Making of an American Epidemic. It's published by Scribner, an imprint of Simon & Schuster, which is owned by CBS. So, Alan, it's interesting. You start off this book by saying, quote, "Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder is real. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Doctors have said an estimated 3 to 5% of American children have ADHD, and yet more than 10% of them are actually being diagnosed with ADHD. How do you explain that?
Well, there are a lot of forces there. I mean, you have doctors who want to help kids, okay? Most doctors are just trying to help what is a difficult situation where a child is struggling, usually in school, also at home, and everyone wants to make the kids and the family's life better. And even though you're not supposed to just diagnose in 40 minutes, okay, and say, here's some Concerta, see if it helps, unfortunately, that's what happens in a lot of cases. And to me, that's a very to make a mistake, which we are now doing about 50% of the time. And that's very threatening to a lot of parents. They don't want to hear that their kid might be misdiagnosed. And I'm sorry, it's just a 50-50 shot at this point. The problem is that when you tell a child that there's something wrong with your brain, that's a pretty big deal. You know, it's not like prescribing antibiotics a little more often than we should. I mean, that's its own thing. But here, you're changing the child's personal narrative. So my feeling is, if we're going to make the diagnosis, let's make the diagnosis, but if we're going to do it right.
So you make the case that when we talk about this disorder, we can't just talk about the medical side, that we also need to talk about the marketing side. Why is that?
Well, I think that certainly Big Pharma, okay, has done a very good job of positioning this diagnosis and these medications with doctors and then with the general public. Beginning in 2001, they started advertising to the general public. And I brought a little friend here. This is Metaman. And there was a company in Britain that made a form of Ritalin, and they decided to advertise it to the general public using Metaman to say, kids, we're going to come save the day with our methylphenidate for ADHD.
And that's different than what we've seen with other drugs, you're saying?
Right. Well, they were the first company to advertise a controlled substance in the United States. They violated a UN agreement to not do that. And all of a sudden, all the ADHD makers, drug makers, from Shire to Eli Lilly to everybody at Johnson & Johnson, they started flooding women's magazines with ads telling concerned mothers, hey, we're going to promise better homework in school and more chores done at home. They literally said, thanks for taking out the garbage, son. And this appeals to parents who want easier lives. And it's a shame, because this thing can be very real, but it doesn't afflict what ends up being 15% of children. And so we've got a point now where half the people say that it's medicalizing childhood and it's complete BS. And then you have half the people saying it's a real scientific medical disorder that's potentially devastating and we have to find and treat every kid. And the two sides are really irreconcilable. And I think that's what I'm trying to do with the book, is try to get everyone to just put down the rocks that they're throwing at each other and learn from the other side. Because right now we're failing our kids in this area. We just are.
You know, I think something that a lot of parents are going to wonder about is, given what you have outlined in this book and the argument that you're making about the way in which there has been a rush to prescribe for conditions which may or may not be ADHD, how do you know if you're a parent or if you're an adult, let's say, who's been diagnosed with ADHD? Because there is no actual specific scientific way to diagnose this. Is that correct?
No, there isn't, but that shouldn't invalidate the entire concern. Okay, there's actually no way to diagnose definitively a concussion, and yet we wouldn't say that's not real. Okay, so a parent of a child who already has been diagnosed, this is difficult information. It's difficult to learn that maybe your kid is one of the millions who has been labeled with something which they probably don't have. They may have something else. They may have anxiety. It might be bullying. There are reasons for why a child is hyperactive and impulsive. Sometimes it's ADHD, and God bless them. But you have to consider the possibility that it's something else. Same thing with a parent who might now be hearing from a teacher or from the school psychologist, I think, you might want to get Johnny an evaluation. That's code. Okay, they're not allowed to use the word ADHD. It's against the law. But you might want to get him evaluated. And of course you should try to help every kid who's struggling. But to be so quick to make this diagnosis and then witness improvement on the medications, and it's going to improve anybody. Okay, it's like saying, try these platform shoes, see if they make him taller. I mean, every kid's going to improve on the drugs to varying degrees. And so what we need to do is get people to realize that we have misdiagnosed this so much. We need to slow down and do it properly, or as best as we can. And right now we're doing a pretty awful job. And you don't just go on a website and be like, okay, sometimes never look at symptoms, and you check it off, these 6-question quizzes that say, oh, well, you better go see your doctor because your score is suggestive of ADHD. I mean, it's complete horse hockey. And yet it's out there because the internet and marketing and these things are sponsored by pharmaceutical companies.
All right, so caution is your watchword, yes. Alan Schwarz, thank you so much.
My pleasure.